Marcus Thompson stepped into the gleaming lobby of Thompson and Collins law firm, his heart racing with a mix of excitement and trepidation. The polished marble floors reflected the bright overhead lights, and the air was thick with the scent of fresh coffee and ambition. As a young black lawyer, he had fought hard to secure this position, and today he felt the weight of his dreams resting on his shoulders. He envisioned himself making partner one day and championing social justice through his legal work, helping those who had been wronged by the system. "Good morning, Marcus," called out a fellow associate, Sarah, as she breezed past him with a smile. Her enthusiasm was infectious, and he couldn't help but return her grin. Marcus adjusted his tie nervously, glancing at the wall adorned with accolades and framed photographs of past partners. Each image told a story of success, yet he couldn't shake the feeling that he might be seen as an outsider in this elite environment. As he made his way to the conference room for the morning meeting, Marcus rehearsed his pitch in his mind. He was eager to prove his worth, especially with the high-profile case that everyone had been buzzing about. A wrongful imprisonment lawsuit had recently come to light, and he could already envision the impact he could make if given the chance to lead it. Inside the conference room, the senior partners were settling into their chairs. David Collins, a stern man in his 50s with a reputation for being tough but fair, presided over the meeting. Marcus took his seat at the table, sitting up straight and pushing aside the lingering doubt that crept into his mind. He knew he had to be bold. "Thank you all for coming," Collins began, his voice authoritative. "Today, we're discussing the wrongful imprisonment case involving the state's failure to exonerate an innocent man. This is a significant opportunity for us to make a difference." He glanced around the table, his gaze landing on Marcus momentarily, but then shifted away. As the discussion unfolded, Marcus listened intently, taking notes and formulating his ideas. When the time seemed right, he raised his hand. "Excuse me, David. I believe I could take the lead on this case. My background in civil rights law gives me unique insight, and I'm passionate about seeking justice for those who have been wronged." A brief silence fell over the room, and Marcus's heart raced as he awaited Collins's response. Instead of the encouragement he hoped for, David's dismissive chuckle echoed in the conference room. "I appreciate your enthusiasm, Marcus, but I think it's best suited for someone with more experience. I'll assign this to Mark Jenkins. He's been with us for years and knows the ins and outs of cases like this." The words stung, and Marcus felt a flush of anger rising within him. He opened his mouth to protest, but quickly closed it, realizing the futility of challenging Collins in front of the other partners. Mark, a senior attorney and a well-connected white man, had a track record that overshadowed Marcus's recent achievements. After the meeting, Marcus stormed out, frustration boiling beneath the surface. He hurried to his office, slamming the door shut behind him. He leaned against the desk, clenching his fists as he fought back the tears of disappointment. How could he prove himself if they continued to underestimate him? Just then, there was a soft knock on the door. It was Gloria Ramirez, his mentor and a senior partner at the firm. "Marcus, can I come in?" she asked gently, concern etched across her face. "Of course," he replied, trying to mask his turmoil. Gloria entered and closed the door behind her. "I saw the meeting. I'm sorry, Marcus. I know how much this case meant to you." "I don't get it, Gloria," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I'm qualified. I've done the work, but they just keep dismissing me." She walked over and placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "I've been there. It's frustrating and it's not fair, but you have to stay focused on your goals. Don't let their biases derail your ambitions. It won't be easy, but you have to keep pushing forward." "What do you mean?" Marcus asked, his brow furrowing. Gloria took a deep breath, recalling her own struggles in the legal field. "When I was starting out, I faced similar challenges. I had to prove myself time and again. But each obstacle only made me stronger, more determined. You have that same fire in you, Marcus. Use it." Marcus looked into her eyes, feeling a flicker of hope reignite within him. "I'll try, Gloria. I just wish I could show them what I'm capable of." "You will," she replied with a warm smile. "Just remember, the fight for justice doesn't only happen in the courtroom. It starts with you and your belief in your own worth." As they talked, The weight of Marcus's frustration began to lift. He understood that although the road ahead would be fraught with challenges, he had the strength and support to navigate it. The battle against bias was just beginning, and he was ready to rise to the occasion. Marcus sat in his cramped office, papers strewn across the desk, the fluorescent lights buzzing above him. His mind raced as he pored over the details of the wrongful imprisonment case that had been handed off to Mark, the senior associate. Though the assignment had ripped at his pride, he had not given up. He believed he could still contribute, still prove his worth. Then it happened. His eyes fell on a document that had slipped between two files, yellowed and worn at the edges. As he unfurled it, a sense of urgency washed over him. "Could this be the breakthrough I need?" he murmured to himself, his heart pounding as he stared at the words. It was an old police report filled with discrepancies, evidence that painted a much different picture of the events leading to his client's wrongful conviction. His hands trembled as he recognized its potential. If he could present this to the team, perhaps they would finally see his capabilities. Just then, Gloria Ramirez knocked softly and entered his office. "Marcus, you look like you've seen a ghost. What's going on?" Her voice was warm, yet laced with concern as she leaned against the doorframe. He looked up, excitement flickering in his eyes. "Gloria, I think I found something that could change everything. This police report, it contradicts the narrative we've been working with. If we can get it into the hands of the court, it could help exonerate our client." Gloria stepped closer, peering at the document in his hands. "This is significant, but I can already sense Collins won't be happy about this. He's been watching you closely since you showed interest in the case. You know how he feels about you." Marcus clenched his jaw. "I don't care what Collins thinks. This is about justice, not his prejudices. I'm tired of being sidelined because of his bias." "Just be careful," Gloria warned, her brow furrowed. "Sometimes standing up can bring more trouble than it's worth." But Marcus was undeterred. The weight of injustice hung heavily on his shoulders, and he felt a fire igniting within him. He needed to act and fast. As he gathered his things, he caught Gloria's gaze, her eyes urging him to be cautious, but also filled with pride. Later that afternoon, as Marcus stepped into the conference room for the case briefing, he could feel the tension in the air. David Collins stood at the head of the table, his face a mask of authority. The other partners were seated, flipping through their notes, unaware of the internal storm brewing within Marcus. "Mark, please lead us through the latest updates," Collins commanded, his tone authoritative. Mark nodded, his voice shaky as he presented the information. "We've reviewed the initial evidence, but it appears we're not making significant progress." Marcus couldn't hold back any longer. "Excuse me, but I have something that could shift the entire case," he interrupted, holding the report aloft. The room fell silent, eyes darting to him in surprise. "What do you think you're doing?" Collins snapped, his voice low but laced with menace. "You've been assigned to assist, not to lead." Marcus felt a surge of adrenaline. "I understand, but this evidence is critical. If we don't act on it, we're failing our client." "Stay in your lane, Marcus," Collins warned, his tone dripping with disdain. "You're not ready for this level of involvement." "Ready? Is that what this is about?" Marcus shot back, his frustration boiling over. "Or is it simply that you don't want anyone else to overshadow your precious Mark?" The tension in the room thickened as Collins leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. "You don't know what you're getting into. I suggest you drop this before you make a serious mistake." Marcus could feel the weight of Collins' prejudice bearing down on him, but he stood tall. "No, David. I will not let you intimidate me. I refuse to be silenced." The meeting ended in a hushed chaos, the partners exchanging glances as Marcus stormed out, determination coursing through his veins. He had to find a way to make this evidence known. That night, he delved deep into research, poring over case files and legal precedents. The hours slipped away, the world outside fading into silence as he became consumed by his mission. "Where are you, Marcus?" he whispered to himself in the quiet of the night. He was alone, but he felt a flicker of hope. He would not be defeated. He would bring the truth to light, no matter the cost. The day of the preliminary hearing dawned with a heavy sense of anticipation hanging in the air. Marcus Thompson sat in the courtroom, his heart racing as he watched his colleague, Mark, stand before the judge. Mark, a senior attorney with a reputation for playing it safe, was presenting a lackluster argument that offered little more than surface-level facts. Marcus leaned forward, gripping the edge of his chair, frustration boiling within him. He couldn't bear to watch Mark squander the opportunity. "Your Honor," Mark began, his voice wavering slightly, "we believe that there are mitigating circumstances regarding our client's situation." He fumbled through his notes, clearly unprepared. The judge, a stern woman with sharp eyes, raised an eyebrow, her impatience evident. "Mitigating circumstances?" she echoed. "Care to elaborate?" I believe that the evidence presented by the opposing counsel is not entirely accurate," Mark stammered, his confidence waning under the judge's scrutiny. Marcus felt a surge of anger. He had spent countless hours uncovering crucial evidence that could sway the case in their favor. And here was Mark, barely skimming the surface, likely sealing their client's fate. He could no longer remain a passive observer. With a deep breath, Marcus stood up, his voice steady but urgent. "Your Honor, if I may?" He felt the eyes of the courtroom on him, a mix of surprise and skepticism. The judge paused, her expression unreadable. "Mr. Thompson, you're not currently on this case. What do you have to add? I understand that I'm not formally assigned, but I've conducted extensive research on this matter." Marcus stepped forward, his heart pounding. "I believe I have evidence that directly contradicts the points made by Mr. Johnson." The judge considered this, her eyes narrowing slightly. "This is highly irregular, Mr. Thompson. Are you prepared to present this evidence?" "Yes, Your Honor. I'm fully prepared." After a moment's hesitation, the judge nodded. "Very well. You may proceed. But I expect you to be brief and to the point." Marcus felt a rush of adrenaline as he moved to the front of the courtroom, the weight of the moment pressing on his shoulders. He quickly gathered his thoughts, recalling the pivotal evidence he had found, a series of emails that not only undermined the opposing counsel's case, but also pointed to a broader pattern of misconduct that had led to his client's wrongful imprisonment. "Ladies and gentlemen of the court," he began, his voice resonating with authority, "I respectfully submit that the evidence presented by the opposing counsel is based on incomplete information." He glanced at the judge, who was watching him intently. "The emails I have uncovered indicate a clear failure to disclose critical evidence that would have exonerated our client." He produced copies of the emails, handing them to the judge and the court clerk. As he spoke, he could feel the tension in the room shift, the audience leaning in, intrigued. The prosecution failed to consider these communications, which detail the negligence of law enforcement during the investigation. These emails clearly show that key witnesses were overlooked and that vital evidence was not pursued. He continued, his passion igniting. "This is not just about our client's future. It's about justice being served and the integrity of our legal system." The judge's expression softened slightly, and Marcus caught a glimpse of approval in her eyes. He could see Mark shifting uncomfortably, his earlier confidence crumbling. As he concluded his presentation, a palpable silence enveloped the courtroom. The buzz of murmured conversation slowly began to fill the air, the gravity of Marcus's words sinking in. "Thank you, Mr. Thompson," the judge said, her voice calm but firm. "We will take this evidence into consideration. Court is adjourned until further notice." As the gavel hit the desk, Marcus felt a rush of relief and exhilaration. He had taken a stand when it mattered most, and for the first time, he could see a glimmer of respect emerging in the eyes of his colleagues. The courtroom buzzed with excitement, whispers of his bold move rippling through the crowd. "Nice job, Marcus," a voice called from behind him. It was Gloria, her eyes shining with pride. "You owned that moment. You showed them what you're capable of." "Thank you, Gloria," Marcus replied, a smile breaking through the tension. "I just couldn't sit back and watch them mess it up." "This is just the beginning," she said, her voice low but filled with conviction. "They won't be able to ignore you after this." As they made their way out of the courtroom, Marcus felt a renewed sense of purpose. He was ready to confront the challenges ahead, to fight not just for his career, but for justice itself. The battle against systemic racism was far from over, but he was no longer alone in the fight. With Gloria by his side and a newfound determination in his heart, he knew he would make a difference. After the hearing, the atmosphere in the courthouse was charged with a mixture of relief and excitement. As Marcus stepped out of the courtroom, a small group of supporters surrounded him, their expressions glowing with gratitude. Among them stood the plaintiff's family, their faces reflecting the weight of their struggles and the hope Marcus had ignited within them. "Mr. Thompson," the mother of the plaintiff exclaimed, tears brimming in her eyes. "You're our beacon of hope. Thank you for believing in our case when so many others turned their backs on us." Marcus felt a rush of warmth as he took her hands in his. "It's not over yet. We still have a long way to go, but I promise I will fight for your family until the end." The father chimed in, his voice thick with emotion. "We can't express how much this means to us. You gave us a voice when we thought we had none." With a nod, Marcus assured them, "Your story deserves to be told, and together, we will make sure it's heard." He could feel the weight of their expectations on his shoulders, but he welcomed it. This was why he had become a lawyer, to advocate for those who had been wronged. As Marcus made his way back to the firm, he couldn't shake the feeling of triumph and determination coursing through him. However, his moment of victory was short-lived. David Collins was waiting for him in the lobby, his eyes cold and calculating. The senior partner's presence was like a storm cloud, heavy with malice. "You did well today, Marcus," David said, his tone deceptively smooth. "But don't get too comfortable. It's a long journey, and it's easy to trip on your own ego." Marcus met his gaze steadily. "I'm not here to trip, David. I'm here to make a difference." David leaned in closer, lowering his voice. "You think you can just waltz in here and take credit for something that doesn't belong to you? You're out of your league." Marcus felt a surge of defiance. "I earned my place here, and I'll prove it every step of the way." David's smile was sinister, a predator sizing up its prey. "We'll see about that. Just remember, I have the power to make your life very difficult." As Marcus walked away, he felt a chill settle in his stomach. He knew David wouldn't let this go easily. Sure enough, as the days passed, he began to notice subtle changes in the firm. Colleagues who had once exchanged cordial greetings now averted their eyes. Emails went unanswered, and important documents seemed to vanish into thin air. One afternoon, as Marcus sat in his office, he received a call from Gloria. "Marcus, I heard about the tension. David is not happy with your progress." "I can feel it," Marcus admitted, frustration lacing his voice. "He's trying to undermine my credibility. I don't know what to do." "Gather your allies," Gloria advised, her voice steady and reassuring. "You need to show them your commitment to this case and the firm. It won't be easy, but you can't fight this alone." "I understand," Marcus replied, his resolve strengthening. "I'll speak to some of the junior associates. If they can see what's at stake, maybe they'll support me." "Exactly. Build your network. Show them that you're not just another lawyer. You're a force to be reckoned with," she encouraged. With a renewed sense of purpose, Marcus hung up and began drafting a plan to rally his colleagues. He knew he had to act quickly before David's sabotage could take a more serious toll. The next day, he scheduled a meeting with the junior associates, inviting them to discuss how they could work together on the case. As he spoke to them, he emphasized the importance of fairness and justice, framing the case not just as a professional challenge, but as a moral imperative. "Together, we can change the narrative," Marcus said passionately. "Let's show everyone that we stand for justice, regardless of the obstacles in our way." As he looked around the room, he noticed nods of agreement, a flicker of hope igniting in their eyes. With each passing moment, Marcus felt the tide beginning to turn. He was ready to fight back against David's insidious tactics, not just for himself, but for all those who had been overlooked and dismissed. Marcus Thompson stood at the head of the conference room table, a determined gleam in his eyes as he surveyed the faces of the junior associates gathered before him. The room, a sleek representation of the firm's high-profile status, felt charged with an energy that was both exhilarating and daunting. He had called this meeting to inspire a collective vision for a more equitable legal practice within the firm, a vision he believed could reshape not only their careers, but also the very culture that permeated Thompson and Collins. Thank you all for coming on such short notice, he began, his voice steady despite the lingering doubts that occasionally crept into the corners of his mind. I know it's easy to feel like just another cog in the machine around here, especially when the stakes are so high. But I want to talk about something that's even more important than winning cases, something that can redefine our legacy as lawyers. The associates leaned in, their interest peaked. Marcus could sense the weight of their aspirations hanging in the air, each one grappling with their own experiences of feeling overlooked or marginalized. I've been sidelined in the past, he continued, recalling the dismissive tones of David Collins. But I've also learned that change doesn't come from waiting for permission. It comes from us together. We have the power to challenge the status quo. We can advocate for our clients in a way that honors their dignity and humanity. A hand shot up from the back of the room. It was Sarah, a bright-eyed associate who had just joined the firm a few months prior. But how do we do that? We're often just told what to do by the partners. How can we make a difference? Marcus smiled, appreciating her candor. Great question, Sarah. It starts with speaking up. We need to support one another, share our insights, and most importantly, hold each other accountable. If we see something wrong, a hint of discrimination or bias, we can't stay silent. We have to be a collective voice for change. The group began to murmur in agreement, and Marcus felt a surge of hope. It was a small step, but one that could lead to significant change within the firm. Meanwhile, in the shadows of his efforts, David Collins was plotting his next move. As the case against the firm unfolded, he grew increasingly agitated by Marcus's rising influence. His brow furrowed in frustration as he paced the dimly lit office, a plan forming in his mind to undermine Marcus's credibility. This young upstart thinks he can challenge me? David muttered to himself, his voice dripping with contempt. I'll show him who runs this firm. Days passed, and Marcus found himself immersed in preparation for the trial. He sat across from Gloria Ramirez in her office, the walls lined with legal tomes and framed accolades that spoke of her own battles against discrimination. David's not going to make this easy for us, Gloria warned, her tone serious as she reviewed the case files. He's going to try to discredit you, Marcus. We need to be ready for anything. Marcus nodded, his resolve hardening. I won't let him intimidate me. I've come too far to back down now. He leaned back in his chair, running a hand through his hair in thought. But what if he tries to plant false accusations? What if he claims I'm incompetent? Gloria met his gaze, her eyes unwavering. We'll create a paper trail. Document everything. We need to ensure there's no room for doubt. If he tries to attack your credibility, we'll have the evidence to counter it. But remember, Marcus, it's not just about the facts. It's about how we present them. We need to control the narrative. As they strategized, the atmosphere in the office grew tense, the weight of the upcoming trial looming over them. Marcus felt the familiar pang of anxiety, but he pushed it aside. He had a mission, and he was not alone. With Gloria by his side, he felt a renewed sense of purpose. Let's get to work, he said, determination etched on his face. We have a case to win, and I'm not going to let David Collins or anyone else stand in our way. Their voices filled the office, a symphony of preparation and resolve as they mapped out their approach. In the back of Marcus's mind, however, an unsettling thought nagged at him. What if David was hiding something? What if the very evidence they needed to secure their victory was being concealed, twisting the scales of justice in ways he couldn't yet imagine? The battle was far from over, and Marcus knew that the true test of his character and of the firm's integrity was just beginning. As the courtroom buzzed with anticipation and tension, Marcus Thompson stood before the judge, his heart pounding in his chest. He had fought hard to get to this moment, and now he had a chance to confront the very man who had tried to undermine him. David Collins sat across the room, his expression a mask of confident arrogance that made Marcus's blood boil. With a steady voice, Marcus broke the silence, addressing the judge and the audience gathered to witness this pivotal trial. Your Honor, he began, I must address a critical issue that has not been revealed in this case. He turned to look at David, who shifted uncomfortably in his seat. There exists a conflict of interest that directly affects the integrity of these proceedings. I have evidence that ties Mr. Collins to the wrongful imprisonment of our client. Gasps echoed throughout the courtroom, and Marcus could feel the weight of every eye on him. David's face paled, and for the first time, he seemed to falter. "Objection!" David shouted, but the judge held up a hand, silencing him. "Mr. Collins, you will have your chance to respond," the judge said firmly, then turned to Marcus. "Proceed." With a deep breath, Marcus pulled out the documents he had gathered, the pieces that had taken him sleepless nights to uncover. This evidence clearly shows that Mr. Collins was not only aware of the wrongful actions taken against our client, but he played a significant role in perpetuating this injustice. He presented the documents, his hands steady as he laid them before the judge. "Here, you will see emails that indicate Mr. Collins knew of the discrepancies in the case, but chose to ignore them, prioritizing his own reputation over the truth." The courtroom erupted into chaos, murmurs of disbelief and outrage filling the air. Marcus's heart raced as he continued, feeling the strength of his convictions swell within him. "This is not just about my career or the case at hand. It's about accountability. We cannot allow individuals in positions of power to manipulate the system for their gain, especially at the expense of innocent lives." David shot up from his seat, his face flushed with anger. "This is preposterous. You are grasping at straws, Mr. Thompson. You have no proof of these claims." His voice trembled with an intensity that was both defensive and desperate. But Marcus was undeterred. "I have the proof, and I will not back down," he declared, his voice rising above the noise. "This case is not just another trial. It is a chance to shine a light on the darkness that too often hides behind the walls of this firm." He turned to the judge, desperation that echoed his determination. "Your Honor, I ask that you order an immediate investigation into Mr. Collins's actions. This cannot go unaddressed." The judge, visibly taken aback by the unexpected turn of events, nodded slowly. "I will consider your request, Mr. Thompson. However, I urge you to ensure that your claims are substantiated." The room fell into a tense silence as the judge deliberated. Marcus could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on him, the anticipation almost unbearable. Finally, the judge's gavel struck down, echoing like a thunderclap. "This court will conduct an immediate investigation into Mr. Collins's involvement in this case." Court is adjourned. Relief washed over Marcus, but it was quickly replaced by a sense of purpose. He had done it. Against all odds, he had brought the truth to light. As the audience began to disperse, whispers filled the air, and he could feel the respect of his peers shifting towards him. Gloria Ramirez, his mentor, stood at the back of the room, her eyes shining with pride. Later that week, the verdict came down in favor of their client, a decision that sent shockwaves through the firm. Marcus was called into a meeting with the senior partners, and as he entered the room, he felt a mixture of anxiety and anticipation. "Mr. Thompson," one of the partners began, "your actions have opened our eyes to the serious issues within our firm. We must acknowledge the change that is needed." Marcus nodded, feeling a sense of hope. "It's time we prioritize integrity and justice over reputation," he responded passionately. In the end, Marcus not only earned the respect of his colleagues, but also a promotion to partner, a title that came with the responsibility to drive meaningful change within the firm. As he stepped out of the meeting room, he felt a renewed sense of purpose. This battle had transformed him, and he was determined to ensure that the culture of the firm reflected the values he stood for. The fight against systemic racism was far from over, but he knew he was no longer fighting alone.